So yeah, I'll be glad to share a presentation and talk a little bit about the background and the context for the design of these pieces that you have there, which are part of an installation. Um, Let me just try and get to share my screen.
Yes, I am.
Oh, fantastic! So yeah, this is a project that it is now exhibited at the Venice Biennale, Venice Architecture Biennale, but it has its origins on a first iteration that we did for the Architecture Biennial in Buenos Aires a couple of years ago with a great group of collaborators. One of them is Alessandro Melis, who's an architect, and he's the main curator of the Italian pavilion now at the Venice Biennale. So we really did this project as an evolution, just trying to get our work in the, share with the world in the Venice Biennale. And it was really a great opportunity to begin to think of, from the point of view of design and architecture and the kind of environments that we create. We wanted to create this installation that, shifted the focus from architecture, from man-centered, human-centered architecture to an architecture that begins to look at the kinds of conditions of living that other kind of species and other organisms need. Therefore, we brought together here in this kind of strange blue and black armature a series of components. We created these two spherical biomes that are on the top that have in them, they have insects, they have things like crickets and cockroaches and other small creatures. And we created the conditions for them to exist within the necessary temperature and humidity. So you see on the bottom another sphere that pumps water, pumps humidity up, and there are sensors that constantly regulate in this kind of self-organization and little environments for the creatures to live in. There's also two big oval-like windows behind the spheres that have slime mold that actually continues to grow and create patterns of growth, again, fed with tubes, fed the humidity from the tanks and with sensors that regulate their living conditions. And there's a bunch of Petri dishes distributed throughout the piece with more cultivation for the slime mold, which was then reutilized to insert in the layers of acrylic. And as much as we think of these as a structure that has all these other non-human centered activities, we wanted to include a kind of component of sensibility for us from humans. So we created two music instruments, which are also 3D printed. And Monad Studio, my design firm, has created a lot of 3D printed music instruments. And we always are keen on creating sonic installations where then there's a performance of picking up these guitars and used up. So this is a view of the slime mold that actually grows within the layers of those big windows. And it's fantastic because it almost looks like at a micro scale, it looks like how cities, move about and develop over time, right? So we're fascinated by this kind of moving, shifting patterns, and they were included within the space of the piece. And we also have, here's a bit of a video that shows what is the livelihood of these pieces inside their biomes. And it's kind of really fascinating to begin to think about creating environments that necessitate to be thought and to actually shift and begin to bring a different kind of lens for the delicate life and the kind of sort of the living together, which is the theme of the Venice Biennale, right? And see here how that belongs on the overall structure. So actually, that structure is coming from music too. The name of it coincides with the name of an album by Carlos Santana from the early 70s called Borboletta, which were inspired by the kind of strange butterfly and the black and blue. So that continues to be in the design that evolved further on beyond this point. And so we were given a space to build something inside the Italian pavilion at the Venice Biennale. And the main topic, the subject of the Venice Biennale, is how will we live together? This key question that involves, how will we live not just us, but other organisms in this earth. How will we all live together? And this is the Italian pavilion, the biggest, most important pavilion at the Biennale. It's like 4 or 5 times bigger than the other pavilions. And we were given this space where we share the space with these other structures that are in the middle of the space. And you see in the back end, in the background, this kind of strange element, which is an evolution of Borboletta on the wall, against the wall. And there's also a screen projection that is a curatorial idea. It will bring the future where this installation will go after the Biennale, which will go in a couple of months, in an outdoor space. So it's kind of an interesting idea of bringing in the same room, different times, different locations, all living together as well. And this is how we began to evolve these frames that we developed, the black and blue frames of Borboletta. This grew 4 or 5 times bigger exponentially than the project for Buenos Aires. And it was actually not easy to bring it physically to Venice. So we built it in Miami, and we created a movie, a really cool documentary that includes the work that we did with the Madco 3D as well. But it is really like exploring these ideas of redundancy in nature and reticular growth. We are echoing the words of Jay Gould, Stephen Jay Gould, a biologist that looked at the idea of redundancy. And how in certain kind of species, there's some limbs and some elements that they don't seem to have a purpose, but over time, when the certain kind of environmental pressures change the conditions, say a fin is developed to be able to swim faster, or elements that are actually co-opted by the environment for better adaptation. And this is actually what we built, as you can see, much bigger than the one in Buenos Aires for Miami Beach and Miami Beach Urban Studios. And this is, again, this structure has evolved some of the components of the original one, but it still has the kind of spherical, the biomes, which are now much more organic. It has a couple of hard-looking like tanks that have water, and have valves and fans that push through the tubes, the humidity for the frames where the slime mold is located. So this whole thing is also connected. It's an interactive structure that keeps kind of balancing the necessary conditions for those patterns to grow within the layers of acrylic. And again, we introduced a new instrument, the bass guitar, designed exclusively for this occasion, which was then that actually traveled to Venice. It was played in Venice, an amazing performance. But this is somehow, here you can see the basic structure for Borboletta. And if you think of the parts that you're seeing there at the gallery that Madco built, this frame divided in 3 parts. So if you were to align those 3 parts, they will actually form and reconstruct the same structure, of course, with different expression, with different material. As this was built and 3D printed using PLA plastic, it is much lighter weight, and it doesn't have the amazing kind of beautiful rough textures that the concrete pieces have, this sustainable concrete pieces have. Nevertheless, you can see here the kind of, you can appreciate the kind of morphological complexity we're aspiring. This is inspired both by life forms found underwater in reef structures, but also as much by the kind of species that are in the lush nature that we inhabit here in South Florida. We have strangler fig trees and mangroves, and they really have the kind of intricacy and the kind of density of elements that we wanted to achieve. And here you see a shot of that slime mold pattern growing and shifting and moving and grooving. And that structure, when it's placed at the Venice Biennale, is actually that big screen. That's a still of a video that is constantly running, and it's still running on a loop. And I couldn't resist the temptation of including some of the photos, amazingly, beautifully well lit, that are there at the gallery of the pieces that were printed using the sustainable concrete. And here's, we obtain a completely different, much more robust and much more powerful at the level of detail of the skin that we have in the concrete pieces. And it's quite extraordinary to think that we can now these pieces could have a new life. And given all the work that we've done with Madco 3D and with my university, Florida International University, exploring 3D printed reef structures, we're envisioning how this actual rugosity of the textures could really be a fantastic surface for coral and other species to grow on and hold on to it. So this is actually, that explains a little bit how these forms came to be, and I'm really glad that they're shown in such a beautiful setting.
Well, thank you, Eric. Really appreciate that illuminating discussion. We've lived with your designs for months, both virtually and in reality. And to us, to me in particular, they really feel organic and alive. They almost have a pulse. And the material seems to express this vitality that I'm assuming you designed in there, and through our medium was expressed a little bit differently.
Yes, I was very surprised and very pleased to see this kind of much more rough. The roughness on the surface is very exciting because you can approach it and begin to detect, and it's much more tactile. You want to see and understand how those surfaces are, and I think that we can begin to think that these are as pieces that express both. They work as pieces that express how it was originated in this much larger continuous spine, but they also work perfectly well in parts. The idea that there are chunks and there are artworks and sculptures in themselves is actually very interesting, because we created this organism that was generated by parts which are repeat themselves, but they begin to adapt and form variations. But then you can divide it up in parts however much you like, and you obtain fully formed structures in themselves, which is what we have there at the gallery. To me, I think we share a philosophy where we trust and we make the best use of technology, but we also put a lot of heart and a lot of craft in the pre-processing of generating these forms, but also in the post-processing, bringing things together, and a lot of human effort and craft goes. And I know so to be the case with Madco 3D. So glad to collaborate with you guys.